A very good morning. Welcome to Palais Populaire and welcome to the International Fall Gathering by Female Science Talents. It's a pleasure to meet you all here. For me, it's actually the first time, so even more. I'm Julia, the new head of the Female Science Talents program of Falling Walls, and I'm here together with our partners. Here's to my right side Ylann Schemm from the Elsevier Foundation, and also Tatjana Gust from the Bayer Foundation, our main partners here. And I'd like to thank them, first of all, to do the welcome here with me, and also to our additional partners, which you can also see here on the roll-up next to me. So the German Research Foundation, as well as Studienstiftung des Deutschen Volkes, Heraeus, Foundation Medicine, and also to Alfred Herrhausen Gesellschaft, which are kindly providing us the venue today. So thank you very much to you, and thanks of course to all of our guests here, to the female science talents of the current patch, to our partners, to our female role models and leaders in science and the industry. It's really great to be here. Today's theme is actually gender parity and diversity as accelerators for social progress. And before I elaborate on that, I'd be happy to pass the word to Ylann. Well, let's say to Tatjana first, right? Okay, thank you, and enjoy the day.
Thank you very much, Julia. A warm welcome from my side on behalf of the Bayer Foundation. My name is Tatjana Gust, as Julia already mentioned, and I'm the Associate Director of the Science Program at Bayer Foundation, which means my work is to drive and to be responsible for the scientific programs that we have at the Foundation. And I will feel very, very honored to be here today. It's also my first time, I must admit. I'm pretty recently just part of the Bayer Foundation. And I feel honored to see all these inspiring young talents. I hope I can meet some of you throughout the day and also meet the supportive partners of the Female Science Talents program. Maybe a couple of words about the Bayer Foundation. The Bayer Foundation catalyzes the power of science and social innovation. And we focused here on two strategic pillars. The first one is focusing on driving social entrepreneurship to enable long-term change. And the second pillar is focusing on advancing science. That's why we are here today and also involved in this program. And here we really want to drive this further, especially also our empowering women in science is also very important to us and one of the major focus areas. And that's why in 2020 we started discussions with the Falling Walls colleagues how to implement a program, especially for women in science, and how to help them and empower them and encourage them to become the next leaders. And 1 year later, in 2021, these discussions led to the Female Science Talents program, and we co-developed this together, and we're very proud to found this and still fund this and also develop this intensive track program. And now we are here today. And the second cohort is here, and I think also a couple of the first cohort people. So I'm very, very happy again to welcome you all and to meet you throughout the day. I hope you can approach me, ask me everything. I'm here, and also tonight. And with that, I wish you a successful gathering, lots of inspiring exchanges, and also a great Falling Walls Summit during the next days. And now I hand over to Ylann.
Thank you so much. So this is my second gathering, the Falling Walls Female Science Talent Program. And I think I can safely say it's a space where there's incredible energy. It's a safe space. It's an invigorating space. And I think this gorgeous venue also helps with that. But it's a space to share and to hear from each other about the amazing pathways you're taking. It's a space for cross-pollination. So I am a huge fan, as you can hear. I'm Ylann Schemm. I'm the director of the the executive director of the Elsevier Foundation. And I think we were maybe next to the party. So we heard about this fantastic program and thought, okay, this is so important. Because we at the Elsevier Foundation are all about inclusive research and health. And we're a small foundation. We like to work with other foundations. We like to partner. What we can do is basically early stage. So it's often that seed funding, that proof of concept to help incubate ideas. And we love to co-create. And one of the reasons we love to do that is because we're able to reach into Elsevier. Elsevier is a scientific publisher, information solutions provider. You'll hear from my colleague Mirat Eldor a little bit later about Elsevier, but we're able to reach in there and pull in resources, colleagues, analytics, oh my goodness, and we can bring all of that to bear. So we have a pot of funding, but more than anything, we have the ability to collaborate. So we like to roll up our sleeves and we like to co-create, and we've been meeting with Julia and Milena for the last couple months, every few weeks, talking about the female science talent, now the Breakthrough Awards, which is the inaugural one this year, which we'll all celebrate tonight. So yeah, I think I'm very excited about this. There's so much to share. I think I'll stop because we want to get started with our amazing panel, but I do want to sort of end with this image. It's an image of a braided river. And the reason is we hear a lot about the leaky pipeline. As women scientists, it's a very tired image, and it's a damaging image. It's a very linear image. It's a very male image. I mean, it sort of suggests that you go to your first science class, you know, in grade school, secondary school, and then it's a straight, iron pipeline all the way to being a tenured professor. And it's not like that. And it's especially not like that for people who have different experiences. And so I think if we think of the image of the braided river, and I did not invent this, there's some beautiful writing out there. If you Google braided river, women scientists, you'll see all kinds of wonderful work on this. But imagine a mountain stream meandering down and then slowly gathering force and then splitting into a million other rivulets and depositing nutrients along the way, coming back together. And think of women scientists' careers. So we're talking about being research scientists. I feel like this represents all of you in the room. Research scientists, but also advising policymakers, mentoring the next generation. You're also very young, so mentoring school kids. So many, science advocacy, science communication, all of these pathways, they're part of the great river. And so I think if we can just think of that image, take it with us today, learn from each other, cross-pollinate, and have a wonderful time. So thank you so much. Thank you for letting us be a part of it. And also to all the other supporters, partners, funders, because it really does take a village. And I think that, my goodness, streams, villages. All right, well, thank you so much. Here's to a great day.
Thank you, Ylann, and thank you, Tatjana. So now it's time for our keynote, and I'm really delighted and grateful to welcome here on stage with us Dr. Asmeret Asefaw Berhe, Director of the Office of Science at the US Department of Energy. So please come to the stage. We are happy to have you here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me. Thank you for the invitation and really an opportunity to join this amazing group of folks for today's conversation. As you heard, my name is Asmeret Asefaw Berhe. I'm currently delighted to be serving as the Director of the Office of Science for the U.S. Department of Energy. I'm assuming that office is not necessarily familiar to a lot of people, so I'll give you a little bit of background. So we are the largest supporter of fundamental research in all of physical sciences for the US. We're an agency with a budget of $8 billion as of the last congressional appropriation. Pretty big agency, so the largest agency, especially in terms of basic research, fundamental science in all of physical sciences. So we're also a little different than most funding agencies for science because we don't just give out money in the form of fellowships and grants. In addition to that, we manage 10 Department of Energy national laboratories, including some really big national laboratories that employ 10,000 scientists. So 10 of these across the country in the US. We manage 28 unique world-class scientific user facilities, typically within the national laboratories or in association with other institutions. We're talking about the largest particle accelerators, light sources in the US, for example, the leadership computing facilities that are home to the exascale computing systems, high-performance computer systems in the country. So pretty major facilities is what we're talking about. We also lead US participation in a number of international partnerships and collaborations, including US scientist participation at CERN, the home of the Large Hadron Collider. We are responsible for delivering the large international neutrino experiment that is being hosted in the US, the LBNF Dune. So pretty big efforts is what we're talking about. And I also happen to be, in my current position, the head of the US delegation for ITER, the large fusion project that is being constructed in the south of France. So gives you a bit of a picture. We're a major science funding agency, but it's a lot more than that. And one of the things that makes it unique is I'm not the first female to be in this current position, but I am the first person of color to be in a position like this in the US, which is a big deal, obviously, as you can imagine. You know, as you can imagine, when I should make clear too that, so my position is typically filled by somebody who's nominated by the President of the United States, and then you have to go through a Senate confirmation process before you could start the position. So, you know, it was pretty clear, pretty surprising, and a huge honor when I first found out that I'm being nominated by the President to do this. But it was really an honor that was the reason why I decided to take a pause from my academic position, because I'm a professor when I'm not doing this in the University of California system, in particular UC Merced, which is the newest University of California campus, about 20 years since it opened. But I'm now really honored to be serving in this position and lead the largest scientific workforce for the nation because of all the people we employ in our national laboratories. And I also wanted to tell you a little bit about my personal background, which I think probably resonates with this group of folks in particular. I like to do this because I feel like, in many ways, I'm unique in the scientific community that I'm part of, like many of you, I assume. Not necessarily because I'm a woman, but also I'm a woman who was born and raised in Africa, who works in the US now. I was born in Eritrea, East Africa, which was where I lived until I finished undergrad, and that's when I migrated to the US. I've been in the US, to be clear, right now for more than half my life, so pretty much most of my adult life. But still, I grew up in a country that is not uncommon to my part of the world, that has had a long history of armed struggle and political strife. So even though I had a wonderful childhood, a very happy family, still quite a challenge, as you can imagine, to grow up in a system like that. But I grew up in a family where education was emphasized more than anything else. A house was full of books. Parents encouraged all of us to read, learn about the world around us. I loved school, I loved science. And that was in many ways an incredible refuge, even from the war and other situations that were happening at the time. And I ended up attending the University of Asmara for my undergraduate in Eritrea, which is the only university in the country, especially at the time that I grew up. It was only the university in a rather small country, as you can imagine, so incredibly competitive to get in, but a wonderful community. Women were not really in the majority, obviously, as you can imagine. In my class, undergrad, in the Department of Soil Science, that we had about 55 students. There were only 3 of us that were women at the time. So not very common, and if I could think of my professors at the time, very few of them, especially in STEM, were also women. But the ones who were there left an incredible mark as role models, and really helped me see myself in that position. Because I was one of these weird, nerdy kids who really grew up wanting to be a professor. So this is a safe space, I could say that. I can admit that, right? And after I arrived in the US, I attended 2 different academic institutions. First, I attended the Michigan State University in East Lansing, Michigan, a rather small town, but a huge university in a small town. Michigan State, for those of you who might not know, is one of these huge top, what do they call it? Big 10 campuses in the US that have like 50,000 or so students. And it's just a huge campus overall. And in many ways, I really loved my time at Michigan State. I was only there for a master's, and I pursued political ecology. But I was still studying issues related to soil, in particular land degradation. But I really wanted to take a bit of a broader lens to think about the political and socio-political, in particular, issues that affect issues like land degradation. And in Michigan State, I felt really included. I felt accepted, which was really wonderful, as you can imagine, when you're new into a country. Michigan State had a vibrant community, especially international students, large numbers of international students. But soon after I learned Michigan State, I realized that that's not a common experience a lot of places, unfortunately. Because after I finished my master's, I moved to the West Coast, and I started a PhD program in Berkeley, UC Berkeley, the University of California campus at Berkeley. Big program, as you can imagine, very popular, very highly ranked university. But there were a lot of challenges that I felt like I wasn't prepared for when I got there. First, my education from Africa in particular was quite discounted in quite prominent ways to my face and behind my face. It was seen as if I didn't know anything, as if I didn't have the preparation or even the understanding of what I'm trying to do there in a major way. I was told more than once, this is Berkeley. That's supposed to mean that, you don't have the right pedigree to be here, basically speaking. It was quite challenging, as you can imagine. There was quite a significant number of incidents, bias, harassment, bullying, that were happening quite in the open, because people were just so bold to be actually, they didn't even try to hide it. And it was one of these prominent things that happened that had stuck in my memory is, in my first year in the program, it's a 5-year PhD program in the US, of course. I was walking down a hallway towards a class that I had. And in the hallway, they used to put pictures of all the graduate students. And this particular graduate program that I was part of had something like 250, 300 graduate students. It was a huge program. And I walked to the end of the hallway, and it wasn't until I reached the end that it registered in my brain. I did not see another black face. And that was quite stark for me. It's really stopped me in my tracks, because I didn't know that when I joined the graduate program. I was so naive that I went there and I didn't even realize that I was going to be the only black face. And it really shocked me in many ways. It really got me to think, how do you get to a place like this? Like, how do you get to a point where there's nobody who's black in Berkeley, a university located really 1.5 miles away from Oakland? Oakland is a really large community of African Americans. A university, a program that studies social issues in the environment, among other fields of science. A university known to be a liberal, really, center in many ways of diversity and cultural diversity and acceptance. Those are the things that I thought I was going to at Berkeley, but the university did not reflect that. Right? The university did not reflect what was the diversity in the community. And as you can imagine, that was quite troubling, and it came with a number of challenges. In many ways, it led me to, in addition to pursuing the science that I went there to study, to actually try and understand, how did we get here? Really to understand the scholarship on exclusion in STEM workplaces in particular. And in many ways, it seeded really a lot of the work that I did later on in my career on equity and inclusion in STEM. And in many ways was also, as I've later referred to in my scientific publications and others, one of the most prominent examples of how the path for women, and especially people from minoritized communities in STEM, is really full of hostile obstacle courses that people have to pass through before they can actually enter and definitely make it and succeed in STEM workplaces. It's not easy, as you can imagine. It still remains hard for me to describe sometimes, but in some ways, it made me be who I am. It shaped me into the academic that I am, that I've tried to pursue not just the science work that I've done in my own group and in collaboration with plenty other institutions, but also focus on equity and inclusion in a major way. And now that I'm in a position that I am, fortunate to be leading, as I said, the largest scientific workforce for the nation, and this major science funding agency for the nation. I try to take that with me, to think about how can we implement policies that make sure that people from all walks of life can not just enter STEM, but also succeed and thrive. And so we've designed a number of new programs that we've implemented in the Office of Science since I got there, with wonderful colleagues who've been working on these topics at the Department of Energy for a long, long time. In particular, one of the things we've done is try and figure out how we can fund researchers from institutions that have historically not been served in an equitable manner with federal funding. So as you can imagine, there are a lot of large, big research institutions in the US. They receive most of the federal funding that's put out for research. And then there's a lot of smaller institutions, especially institutions that serve minoritized communities, that do not really get their fair share. So one of the things we've been pushing is to put aside some of the funding to really help these institutions that have really been forgotten by the federal science ecosystem, and not been getting their fair share. So support training grants, capacity building grants for those institutions in particular, but then at the same time trying to transform our entire funding process. So we introduced what we call peer plan, or plan for inclusive and equitable research, to basically ask everybody that comes to us for funding right now to tell us how they're going to make sure the research that they're going to do is going to be serving every member of the public in an inclusive and equitable way. And the way I tell this to scientists in particular is, we're doing what we love in science because the taxpayers generously provided the resources for us to do so. And making sure that we serve every member of that public in an equitable and inclusive manner is not a favor we're doing to anybody. We're the ones getting a favor. We're the ones getting the resources from every member of the public. So this is the least we can ask you to do, and you make sure that the science environment does not remain exclusive and out of reach for folks. So obviously, I've only been in this position for a short period of time, so we're not going to declare any wins or pat ourselves on the back too much, but at least we're seeing very, very promising results. And that will hopefully lead to a more inclusive and equitable science ecosystem for the nation. Maybe I'll stop somewhere here, but I just want to say a couple of things. You've seen, as women in science, all of us have seen all sorts of results and publications. And there was one that I really wanted to note in particular recently, that was published in Science Advances, that got a lot of people's attention in the last couple of weeks, that showed that women in the workforce, their participation in particular suffers even after they get tenure, which really, to me and to many of you, I'm sure, speaks to the lack of support that we have, a sustained support for people who have competing demands on their time from ecosystems, from funding and our institutions. And it was really highlighted in that study, and many others at this point, that the number one reason why women leave academia in particular, especially after tenure, has to do with toxic workplace behaviors. Harassment, bullying, discrimination that are persistent, of course, from the beginning. But at some point, it becomes too much, and people just abandon their positions and move on to something else. We've all heard the anecdotes. We've all seen the impact that this would have. And one of the things that we've done historically in my own academic circles, we used to run, well, I used to be part of a group that runs a project called Advanced Geo before I took this position. It's a National Science Foundation funded effort in the US to empower scientists to actually be a positive force of change in each of our institutions. For all of us to just say, not on my watch. We are not going to let these kinds of behaviors go on, and we're going to intervene in any way that we can. Maybe not confront harassers in the face. We all know that we may not necessarily do that all the time or be able to do that, but figure out ways and teach folks about ways that we can intervene in a positive way to make sure that we do not let this kind of behavior perpetuate. It already happened for decades and decades since then, but maybe this is the generation that finally puts up, if you will, a major resistance, if you will, that's obviously getting noticed. I think we're getting the support from funding agencies, major publication houses, the governments of many countries, including mine. So I hope this is a time, including these kinds of gatherings, are a motivation for all of us to move the needle in that way. With that, I'll say thank you and really appreciate everybody's time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Berhe. It's a pleasure to have you. We luckily have the time for 1 to 2 questions of the audience. And I can also let you know that Dr. Berhe will also be around, probably until the next coffee break. So if there are more questions, feel free to approach her. Are there any questions right now? Zainab.
Thank you so much, Dr. Berhe. This is it's an honor to hear from you, and also goes on to show one of the reasons why these gatherings are so important. Thank you for sharing your story. And my question to you is, since you're leading one of the biggest institutes in the US, what are some of the top skills that you would say, and these could be professional or personal, that you would attribute to the massive success that you've had, that we could all learn from? Thank you.
You're being a little too generous. I appreciate your question.
I'm not.
Thank you. Probably one of the best things that have happened is as you've heard, I've faced a bit of challenge in my own academic career trying to get to where I am. But I've also had the good fortune of eventually finding really wonderful mentors that I've sought out when things were not working very well. And those people have made incredible difference for me. So one of the things I tell folks, especially early in their careers, is be in charge of your own mentoring and find a community of mentors that will support you at every step of the way. And those community of mentors in many cases might actually be, some of them would be your peers, but really having that solid community of people that you can depend on and be able to seek help, support. We all need support at one point or another, right? It's not a weakness at all, because we're trying to break barriers. It's really hard to do it by yourself. It's really, really helpful if we have a community of folks. So get in charge of your own mentoring and find those people from wherever you have, or seek the connections that will help you find the right mentors. And really learn to work with different kind of people, right? Because being able to work with different folks, it's not just beneficial for management type positions, but even in research, right? It expands the network of people you could work with. It opens incredibly new opportunities that just drives the success. I personally see science as a team sport. I have a really good friend who likes to say, science is a team sport. Choose your team wisely. And once you do, you could accomplish a lot of incredible things. And so those would be my advice. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yes, please, Ylann.
Thank you so much, Dr. Berhe. Very, very inspirational. A question for you. Now that you've paused on being a, excuse me, a research scientist and you've stepped over to the policymaking aisle, what would you say is the hardest thing about being, well, advising policymakers, being a policymaker yourself as a scientist?
I think first I have to say it's the bureaucracy, right? As an academic, I was spoiled at not having a boss, not having to work with the hierarchy. Really, you have a lot of freedom in an academic system, right? To do whatever it is that you want, and the system is there to support you to do that. Government agencies are a little different. Daniel would agree with me. DOE happens to be a very hierarchical organization. It has to be by nature. I think to me, that's the hardest part. But what made the work possible is, I'm a political appointee. Every new administration brings a political appointee to this position that I'm serving in. But what really allows us to do a lot of things is a partnership with the federal permanent staff at the agencies. So to me, if I have to say, as hard as managing the bureaucracy is, working with people who know how to manage it in the office has just been incredibly amazing. Thank you.
Thank you once again for your encouraging words and also advice. We appreciate it a lot. I think we have to wrap up here.
Yes.
But as I said, luckily she'll be around with us. So, yeah.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.